Hi everyone, welcome to this short video. I'm delighted to be with Jo Nicholson from Social Value Aotearoa today. We're just going to ask you a few quick questions so you can tell us a little bit more about your network. So first of all, first question, what is Social Value Aotearoa? And have I pronounced that correctly?
You've done really well. Well done, Dean. Very good. So Social Value Aotearoa. So this is, we're from New Zealand, Social Value New Zealand. And we are the joint member network of Social Value International. So we are a member-led network. Our members pay fees. And through that, we join the global movement of trying to change the world, the way the world accounts for value.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, next question. Tell us a bit about the history. How did it start?
Right. Well, we actually started from a lot of providers who were actually working in our Indigenous space in what we call whānau ora space. A lot of providers that were actually looking for a tool that could actually put families at the centre and look at impact through the eyes of the stakeholder from a bottom-up approach, opposed to just a population level or a top-down kind of mechanism. So a lot of people did tours overseas to different sort of different conferences, and through one of the conferences they came across the social return on investment tool, which resonated really well with what they were looking for, which was around stakeholders at the centre, and then a framework which would allow it to potentially come to an accounting value, which would actually be able to resonate with accountants, be able to talk some language so that they would be able to talk about the value they make through the eyes of the stakeholder to funders and actually talk about impact. So they brought that back and they started to look at that tool and actually sort of start to really see how it would sort of fit in with their commissioning for outcomes models, which they were actually working in that space. So as they started to unpack it, they actually decided that this was a tool that actually needed to have a New Zealand context with it. So they decided to actually hold the space and create the New Zealand network. And actually they wanted to have some international peer to best practice that they could actually leverage off and learn from, but also be able to create a space in New Zealand where we could widen the conversation and actually grow a New Zealand context around it. So it grew from providers looking to tell the impact, especially around the whānau ora providers, but actually knowing that there was a whole New Zealand conversation to be held, but actually acknowledging that it came from international best practice.
Fantastic. You know, it's great to hear how that journey has come a long way, and really enjoyed watching you grow, and particularly the whānau ora framework that you've developed. How we were able to sort of work closely with you to align that framework to the Social Value International principles. Can you just say a few words on that?
So I suppose that's another leverage of it. So while we were using international best practice, and New Zealand itself didn't have a lot of practitioners or expertise in that area, so we had to build capacity. So one of the ways that we were looking with, along as with SRI training the impact, was actually looking at a New Zealand way of how, because we were trying to build the organisational culture around having impact and families and whānau at the centre. So it actually came from one of the ministers actually asking, how do you actually know that for this space, which is our whānau ora providers, were true whānau ora providers? You know, in other words, they had whānau at the centre or families at the centre, and building programs that talked about the impact an aspirational framework for that. So working along, we knew that the social value principles aligned in a lot of the areas that we wanted to actually talk about around our data and refining practice and having stakeholders at the centre. But there were also genuine essence that actually created what we call a true whānau ora ecosystem that allowed us to be a provider network that actually nobody could just mirror and just say, tick a box and say this was a whānau ora provider. That framework that was actually the framework that we originally aligned was very Western at that time, and actually aligned to your project. There's some exciting developments that have been happening in that framework, how it's actually been taken through the actually by Māori for Māori, and it's now morphed into the kawa of whānau ora, which is being actually worked on even more. But it's that principle still aligns, but it's very much being put into the whānau ora context. So we've kept the one that we created to hold the space and to actually understand the principles, but there's exciting work happening in how it's really being driven now by the providers, and really articulating the work from the bottom up that actually makes lives and breathes what a whānau order provider is. But that framework, we'd always decided that it could be used by other organisations, you know, looking to actually look at a whole organisational approach to impact, not just one part of it. How do you build the whole culture within the organisation? So that was that framework idea, but definitely aligned along the social value certificate and principles that SVI had.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to seeing how that's evolved. It does sound exciting. Thanks, Jo. Last question from me then is, could you give other people 3 top tips about setting up a network? I'm hoping people watching this video will be wanting to emulate the success of your network. So what tips would you give them?
Relationships. Just go out there and keep talking, like to find where you can add value, where you can align, that you're not there to take over the world, that you're there to build relationships and connect and find common places where you can connect. So a lot of relationship building. We went to a lot of different other networks all the time when we were trying to find our place, and just continue the conversation, and did a lot of shared co-hosting, things like that. So definitely relationship building. Yeah, and collaboration, I suppose, is another one. And bringing in a variety, we found it really useful to leverage off the Social Value International whānau families are out there, and all the knowledge, so that it was actually saying that we're not doing this alone, we're part of a bigger movement, that it's a global practice, but also sharing in and sharing out. And follow your members. Like, we just always keep on celebrating any step that our members make in the journey towards having impact at the centre of everything they do, and understanding from the stakeholders' lens. So, yeah. Perfect. And keep going.
Practice what we preach, eh? Involve stakeholders. I love it. All right, yeah. Those are really great tips, Jo. Thank you very much. I think that's wraps up our short chat for today, but thank you as always. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.